JK could not have come at a better time, Nick Friedel.
How does he fit alongside Jimmy Butler?
You have an older team in Steph, Dre, and Jimmy. You need young, fast, big. What is Jonathan Kuminga? All of those things.
Check.
And vibes around the team. Just not where they need to be right now, but the vibes of the Golden State Warriors are getting better and they're increasing. Why? Well, the addition of Jimmy Butler, but also this update from Warriors PR yesterday, Nick Friedel. Warriors forward Jonathan Kuminga, who suffered a sprained right ankle on January 4th versus Memphis and has missed the last 21 games, returned to team practice yesterday at Chase Center for the first time since sustaining the injury. His return to game action will be based on his continued progress and physical readiness. JK could not have come at a better time, Nick Friedel.
He's on the way. That is always a tell from a PR staff that we're only a couple more steps from a few more practices usually to get him back on the floor. Spadone, obviously the Warriors are going to be more cautious because he has been out so long. But we'd all agree, with Kuminga out there on the floor, it brings a different dimension to this Warriors group. What I am so interested in as the practices start up again and as Kuminga starts to feel better on that ankle, how does he fit alongside Jimmy Butler? So much of the last couple weeks has been, well, Jimmy fits. We know he can get to the line. He's the yin to Steph's yang as far as offense. They can both create their shots. Kuminga was playing very well before he got hurt, but Kuminga was playing on a team without Jimmy Butler, and at times, because of where Steph and Draymond were, he had to carry a lot of the offensive load in certain games. How does he fit in knowing what's on the line for him, not only the rest of this year, going into the summer, and hoping that he gets that next contract deal?
It's also that. It's also the adjustment from all these players, right, that have been now, you have the addition. I'm thinking about guys like on the fringes that are going to be important pieces going forward, though. A guy like a Brandon Pajemski, a guy like a Moses Moody, Quentin Post at times, right? Buddy Hield, like the minute allocation and their roles on this team now. So not only do you make a huge trade for Jimmy Butler to bring him in, I should say, and the amount of minutes he's going to get and the amount of attention he's going to garner, but now you bring Jonathan Kuminga back into the fold. So how are things going to change there? That's up to Steve Kerr, the head coach. And so I look at Steve, and maybe he does have the biggest adjustment. If we go outside of the players, it's Steve trying to figure out this Tetris puzzle, this Rubik's Cube, if you will, this, as we've been talking, just finding out what fits and what doesn't. And, we were talking to Tim Hardaway earlier in the week, Hall of Famer, obviously a Warriors and Heat legend. And, we were asking about, how does, Jonathan Kuminga, integrate himself into this new lineup? Just be yourself, play who you are, be who you are. Just go out there and be Jonathan Kuminga. Is Jonathan Kuminga going to have to play differently at all, do you think, Nick, when he does come back out there? Or is it as simple as Tim Hardaway puts it and says, just play your game? Is it just putting your head down, getting to the line, being aggressive, trying to attack the glass? Again, his three-point shot, I think when it's in rhythm and it's a quick pass, hey, pull up, great. If he has to think about it and he has to, just to take a quick one or two dribbles, it's usually not going in. I do think his mid-range game is underrated. I think he can get to his shot. He's a big athletic guy. He can get to that shot, that Wiggins, that Jimmy Butler type of mid-range shot. He has that in his arsenal. But is it as simple as saying, you know what, JK comes back and he just needs to be who he was prior to the injury?
It's very simple in theory, Spadone, that if you're Kuminga, yeah, I'll just play the way I was playing. But as we know, it wasn't the same personnel out there on the floor. What I'm curious about for Steve Kerr and that coaching staff is, how do you get a young player like Kuminga, who was having so much success in various doses before that injury, to play at a level where he's not trying to press too hard to fit back in? On top of, we know what that contract extension potentially could be over the summer. We know what he wants and what his agent wants moving forward. But how do you get a young player to stop thinking about that going into the stretch drive of the year? This is where the mindset of Jonathan Kuminga becomes most important to me for anything that the Warriors do. If he's pressing too much and he's saying, I got to put up my numbers, I have to try and stand out a little bit in this star-studded group now with Jimmy Butler, if he presses, that could spell a lot of messy lineup combinations and rotation sets for Kerr and his staff. If Kuminga comes out and just says, I'm going to fit in for the best of the group, my time and my money will come, well, then the Warriors are going to be set up not only to make potentially a solid playoff run into the summer, Kuminga will get paid, and if they believe that he can be the guy that they hope he can be, I'll tell you exactly who will sign off on it. It'll be Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and now because of his standing in the league and the fact that the Warriors just paid him some big, big money for the next couple of years, it'll be Jimmy Butler as well.
Brian Geltzeiler, Sirius XM NBA Radio, joined Steiny and Goo yesterday. Geltzy, on Jonathan Kuminga's return, he thinks it's going to be a godsend, Nick.
But I will also say this, when Kuminga comes back, he's going to be a godsend because the one other element they're missing is that uber athletic guy, and I think Jonathan Kuminga can absolutely be that. And Kuminga, with not having to be a lead guy and just kind of having what he gives you be extra and be gravy, and knowing that if he's not playing great, you have the luxury of sitting him down, that's the perfect scenario for Jonathan Kuminga 2025.
And that's the tricky part, as you just alluded to. It's like, yeah, it's easy on one aspect to say, hey, the load's going to be lessened off him. He doesn't need to be that number 2 scorer for this team going forward because you got Jimmy Butler. But if I'm Jonathan Kuminga, don't I like being the second leading scorer because that's something my agent's going to use in negotiations? That's something I'm going to say. Like, listen, when I was out there with Steph, when I was the number 2 guy, I was producing. Well, you bumped me down to the 3 guy, you reduced my minutes. Why do you think I'm not producing as much? So it goes back into contract negotiations always with this stuff. And we're projecting a little bit here. But for the here and now, like, I agree with Geltzeiler. You have an older team, an older trio in Steph, Dre, and Jimmy. You need, especially in the Western Conference, as we were talking about getting our head over our heels when it comes to championship aspirations, right? Mm-hmm. You just think of the West, it is young, it is fast, it is big. What is Jonathan Kuminga? All of those things.
Check, check, check.
You need all of those. And that's what some of those guys lack on your team. Yes, Steph can still be quicker than most. He can still get his shot off. He could still be that guy offensively. Defensively, you know what you're getting. You're not getting much. Jimmy Butler, he's very strong. He is big. Quickness, not as much, right?
The defense that is still very good isn't to the level it used to be even a couple years ago in Miami.
And I'd say the same with Draymond Green. Big guy, big body still, great defensively at times, not as consistent, can still be a good ball handler and a playmaker, and his shot will go down occasionally, but he's not a traditional scorer. So I'm going to need Jonathan Kuminga to be that guy that can pick up all of the weaknesses of those big 3 now that we're calling it. That can he be that guy to pick up where those guys are now leaving off at that end of the table?
I think he can. I think he can fill in some of the gaps the same way Jimmy did for this group, Spadone, but it is interesting in the contract negotiation context because what was the story that came out last year? Jonathan Kuminga and Steve Kerr aren't on the same page.
Yeah.
And historically in the league, usually that's coming from an agent somewhere trying to push their client's best interests or what they believe to be their best interest to the forefront. The issue for the Warriors is now you're closer to those contract negotiations. You've got to figure out if Kuminga is a piece that you want to continue to build around for your franchise or potentially put him in some kind of sign and trade. I am intrigued by the idea that Kuminga is needed on this team for them to be at their best. But in order to be at their best, he might have to make a personal sacrifice where he's not putting up those numbers every night that he would want to. Is he at the place in his career where he feels comfortable doing that? The greater good of the team over the good of oneself at a time when it behooves a young player to put up those numbers that you're talking about and get those extra minutes. If Kuminga can do that, I think it'll go a long way for goodwill towards his feelings about the Warriors and the Warriors' feelings about him.
He's still only 22, which is insane. He's still so young in regards, and he was so raw when he came out of the G League Ignite, right? And we've been talking about this in the, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? It'll hit me in a second, but you talk about him as a player coming out, and you have the more polished Moses Moody, obviously, from Arkansas. He was one and done, but he was an old soul. And you keep talking about potential, right? That's the word I wanted to say. Potential with Jonathan Kuminga, and he's finally reaching that, and then he gets hurt, and now he's back to this whole different scenario. I just hope we as a fan base can have some patience for Jonathan too. Like, I don't want him to go out there and he struggles a couple games. It's like, oh, well, he's ruining all this. We got to, I don't think we can sign him. Let's as we're watching with the Lakers and Luka Doncic, who's been struggling in the first few games, and Luka, he's an all-pro 5 times, whatever it is, all-NBA, excuse me. Let's give Jonathan Kuminga a little grace here, Nick, before we start crushing it in his fit with this team, because this is a very, as far as fitting in now, being out, it's almost like, when you're in school and you're really sick, or you had to do something, or you lost someone, there's a tragedy, and you were gone a long time. And all of a sudden you come back and there's a new teacher that's teaching the class, and it's just...
What happened?
What happened? Like, whoa, I feel lost. I feel like I'm not catching up now. My routine's out of whack. Like, there's going to be an adjustment period for Jonathan. I just hope the fan base and Dub Nation can give him some grace in this, because he might be pushing a little bit, as you're saying.
I think it's a very human reaction if he does. But Spadone, what I'm curious about is, how does the fan base feel as Kuminga as a building block for the future? We know what he's done in these first couple years, and we have seen, and always the key word that pops up with Kuminga to this point, the flashes that have appeared. But do Warriors fans believe that he is the type of guy who's going to develop, improve, and become one of the key building blocks on a team that all of a sudden has hope again and has at least the mirage of a championship on its horizon, despite what Draymond said repeatedly over All-Star Weekend? I just don't feel like the fan base is 100% in either direction, that Kuminga is going to be the next piece that they need, or that they're ready to give up and say, all right, let's move Kuminga in the summer, get the deal done, put him in a sign and trade, and get somebody who's a little bit older and a little bit more polished in here, and let's see what can happen.
It's almost funny because, in a way, and I get it, his assets and what he brings to the table are different than this player, but it's almost like, if it doesn't work out and you do move off of him and it's a sign and trade, or we'll see, you sign him or you don't. Andrew Wiggins as a player right now could still, if you just imagine Andrew Wiggins with Jimmy Butler and Steph and Draymond, because Wiggins is young enough too, where you could have looked at those top 4 and be like, wow, that's something there. Now, Miami, what were they asking for? What were the Warriors? They didn't want to give up Jonathan Kuminga, and that they wanted to keep him. He's a huge.
Well,
huge piece.
They must have been asking for Kuminga prior to
Correct.
The real breakdown at the end with Jimmy in Miami.
Because obviously the talks got to a point where his value was just completely tanked. Pat Riley knew, Eric Spoelstra knew, we need to get something for this guy.
And get him out of here.
And get him out of here. And they did that, and they settled. And they got Andrew Wiggins, who, again, nice piece, doesn't have the future potentially of a Jonathan Kuminga, but is a nice piece. Was the second plus player on a championship team at one point. And you know what you're going to get off the court. He's going to be a lunch pail guy. He's going to go there. He's not going to get hurt generally. He's going to be available. You know what you got there. But it almost feels like, if I was adding Andrew Wiggins back to this team instead of a Jonathan Kuminga, it'd be a lot easier, because you know what Andrew Wiggins you're going to get. You're not going to get a guy that could potentially be frustrated with his role. You know what his role was going to be. I mean, just think about last year with Andrew Wiggins. And listen, people are probably tuning in saying, is Spinoni insinuating that they should have traded Kuminga and kept Wiggins? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's levels to players and their roles and what you expect out of them going forward. And Jonathan Kuminga is a wild card in this scenario, because he is so young and because he is trying to get a contract for the first time, a big contract outside of his rookie deal. And I don't know what to expect from him going forward, because he's coming to a brand new team, basically. Brand new is strong, but mean, Jimmy Butler's on the team. He left when you had, Andrew Wiggins and Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton and all those guys. DeAnthony Melton was out prior to that, but you get what I'm saying. I don't know what to expect from Jonathan Kuminga. I don't.
I just think this is a perfect moment to remind everybody that the Warriors have Kuminga and he continues to improve. And they got Wiggins. And who did they trade to get both of those guys, Spadone? D'Angelo Russell. And so as we're talking through this morning about roster building and where do you feel most comfortable and which team's vibes are feeling the best, it is so critical to remember that in order to give yourselves the best chances at winning these titles, of course it comes down to the stars, always the Stephs and the Draymonds, and before the injuries piled up, Clay when he was still here, and getting Kevin Durant to sign off on coming here. But it is those other moves under the radar that always, always, always make such a big difference. And that move specifically with Wiggins and the pick that became Kuminga for D'Angelo Russell to Minnesota, for the missteps that the Warriors front office have made, certainly in the draft, and James Wiseman at number 2 comes right to the forefront. That trade was an absolute home run for then Bob Myers and that staff.
Jonathan Kuminga, is he the team's, when he comes back here, is he the team's third best player or fourth best player? Are you ranking Draymond ahead of him in this hierarchy?
I would still put Draymond ahead of him because Draymond, when he's locked in defensively, is unbelievable still. Kuminga probably has more ability to impact the game on both ends. I don't think that's in any question. But Draymond, after so many years playing at such a high level on the defensive end, can sway things at a level that Kuminga just hasn't shown to do yet.
See, I'm looking at this final stretch here, and if he can pick up where he left off and he can push for that third spot in the hierarchy of this team, not to say that he's going to be the leader of Draymond. Draymond, he's cemented his status with this team. He's one of the leaders of it. He's the team's best defensive player. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if Steph doesn't have it, if Jimmy, the shots aren't falling, I could lean on Jonathan Kuminga. And if he could be that guy going forward, I think, you could absolutely be talking about Western Conference Finals for this team, because if he could continue what he did prior to the injury and that trajectory he was on, see, that's why I'm thinking we're looking at this in the way of we're adding like a sixth man, we're adding like a fourth guy. But if you look at it in this lens, and I was listening to the crosstalk yesterday with Steiny, Goo, Willard, and Dibbs, and they're talking about, duos or trios in the league right now, or who are you taking over Steph, Dre, and Jimmy right now? How many trios or duos are you taking over just Steph and Jimmy as well? I was like, well, what if I said it was, Steph, Jimmy, and Kuminga? How if we viewed it about that? Because I do think we're shortchanging his abilities offensively a little bit here and what he can give, because I know Draymond as a playmaker is great, but I've seen Kuminga with the best of them drive to the hoop, get to the foul line, the 3-point shots going, the mid-range is going. There's a potential here. Again, that word potential. This could be special with those top 3 guys if Kuminga turns into the player that many think he could be, Nick.
Spadone, if Kuminga turns into that player, 2 things will absolutely happen. One, the window and ceiling for this team become a lot wider and a lot higher, and you start to think more seriously about, all right, is there one more legit push within them? Number 2, if Jonathan Kuminga over the next 2 months of the regular season and however long they were to go in the playoffs becomes the third guy on this team, he's going to get paid exactly what he wants. There's not going to be a fight going back and forth between player and organization saying, I don't know, why don't you go try to find that somewhere else and bring it back to us? If he takes that kind of step, the Warriors are in great shape, and so is Kuminga from a financial standpoint.
888-957-9570. Dub fans, where are we at with Jonathan Kuminga? What are your expectations of Jonathan Kuminga when he does rejoin this team with Jimmy Butler, that new addition? How is he going to fit in there? Are you expecting Steve Kerr to slowly integrate him back? Is he going to be coming off the bench? Probably. There's so many different angles with the Jonathan Kuminga discussion. I would love to hear Dub Nation's thoughts. 888-957-9570. As we're talking about vibes this morning, doing vibe checks and all the teams. How are we feeling about the Niners? Well, we're a little down on theirs. We're feeling great about the Warriors. And, we actually asked the question early on in the week about, Steph winning his fifth in comparison to, the San Francisco 49ers. If they want their quest for six, right? There's six Lombardi. I was like, give me Steph's fifth. Absolutely. And if Jonathan Kuminga is a part of that and he helps Steph get his fifth ring, oh, yeah, that guy's getting paid. Maybe not this year or next year, but he's going to be also not getting paid. He's going to be getting legend status because not only do you have a building block for now, Nick Friedel, he's 22. He's 22. He could be doing this for the next decade for the organization. That's why I'm so hesitant on moving off a guy like that, because the tantalizing aspect of his play, and quite frankly, there's not another young guy on this team right now where I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a huge building block for the future. Like, I like Moses Moody. He's a solid piece. I like Brandon Pajemski. Solid piece. Trace Jackson Davis at times. Solid. Quentin Post for a cup of coffee. Guy Santos. Great. But Jonathan Kuminga is the guy where it's like, if this guy hits, we hit on something for the next decade plus. And that sells me on the future past Steph. And that's why I'm going to be locked in going forward with this team, not being like the Chicago Bulls post Jordan. Are players looking at the Niners and saying, that's the team in the NFC I want to go to win a ring? Not that it's just the NFC. Hell, you got to think about other teams around the AFC as well. Like, I think you lump the Niners in the same place you lump maybe, the Baltimore Ravens or the Buffalo Bills. Those teams had better years last year, but historically, they're all kind of muddled in the same area. Obviously, the Bills and the Ravens have been blocked by the Chiefs, so they haven't been able to get there. But I think the Chiefs, for the first time in a long time, I actually believe the Chiefs might be taking a slight step back next year. And I catch myself knowing, I watch the AFC West all year long. I'm very tapped into all things there, and they'll probably cruise to winning the AFC West title. They'll host a playoff game, and they'll be back in the AFC Championship because they're the Patriots of this era now. Like that, they're the Tom Brady, they're the Bill Belichick Patriots of the 2000s. But I look at the rest of the league, and I'm not so sure, Nick, if I'm a free agent and I say I want to go win a ring, the Niners are one of my top three choices. You seem to think they still are.
I think they can be because they have the foundation of such a great organization in the last 5 to 10 years, Spadone. That's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on the power of Kyle Shanahan to be able to talk to whomever may come in the doors out there in Santa Clara and say, hey, we know what it takes to get there. We just haven't gotten over the hump yet. And there's still time to do it. We believe in Purdy. We think he's the guy. We're going to get that deal wrapped up. But even as we're started to go through this conversation, there's a team that also now has a rookie, not a rookie anymore, but a guy on a rookie contract that would be one of those destinations that you think that other players would start to look at that could give the Niners some trouble. And that's the Commanders. When you have Jaden Daniels playing at the level he was playing at last year, you have Dan Quinn providing that extra energy that team has needed for so long and getting them set up structurally sound defensively with more help on the way. That's the team now that I'd look at, aside from the Eagles, like you said, where you go, because Niners fans know full well how much it means to have Purdy, and certainly as Mr. Relevant, he was on the best rookie contract that
are you kidding me?
Possibly could be.
Best bargain in sports.
Completely. But when you have a guy who's on a rookie deal as a quarterback, it allows for other moves to be made around other parts of your roster. The Niners aren't going to have that luxury anymore. The Bay has been bracing for it now for a couple years. But that is a team, if you're telling me, all right, I'm going to go play with Jaden Daniels for a group that was on the cusp of making the Super Bowl, or I'm going to trust that Kyle Shanahan can get things back in order offensively and find a way to start racking up points as some of the weapons leave, that is an interesting battle between two teams, one that seems very much on the rise, one team out here in the Bay that seems like it used to be and has to find its way again.
And speaking of those Washington Commanders, they are slotted right now. If we're going total cap space, so teams like that have a lot of money to spend this offseason, Washington Commanders number 3 right now in total cap space.
There you go.
$79 million in total cap. Then you got the Raiders at 95, and then the New England Patriots have $125 million. They're going to have to overpay to get some Drake May some help. God, that guy, because he made some throws. He made some plays last year where it was like, okay, Drake May, they may have found something there. Yep. They may have found something in Drake May. But yeah, they're going to need to overpay. Maybe Debo goes there. Maybe they get Debo. Maybe they get T. Higgins. Get some weapons for one Drake May. But yeah, you look at Washington, trying to see some other teams in the NFC that have a lot of money to spend. The Bears, obviously, Ben Johnson coming in there now. Disappointing season. Kind of mixed bag of Caleb Williams. I think we all thought that they were just going to hit the ground running and they were going to be a playoff team instantly. I was drinking that Kool-Aid. I still think Caleb can be really good. It's just the Bears' dysfunction. I think, again, we always underrate it. Franchises matter. Ownership matters, top to bottom. And look at the Washington Commanders. Again, key example, ownership. Get rid of Dan Snyder, bring in Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, all that crew. Look what happened. Second year in the playoffs.
It's a perfect segue to another wrinkle in our conversation, though, because why, if you're a free agent or somebody who's looking for a change of scenery in the NFL, why would you consider coming out here? Because you trust that Shanahan knows what he's doing, that Lynch will find the right pieces to build on that roster, and that Jed York will continue to spend the money that it takes to make one of the best organizations historically over time in the league that much greater as the money continues to pile in. The Bears, I know way too much about based on my time in Chicago, and the McCaskey family just doesn't spend usually, historically, on the same level.
I like real quick how you said, I know way too much about the Bears. Like it was a bad thing that you knew all this Bears knowledge.
It scares me.
That you hate I hate that I know all this about the Chicago Bears.
It scares me. I think they finally made a good coaching hire. Yeah. If ever there was a guy who could find Caleb Williams to help get him on the right path, it is Ben Johnson. We saw what he did so often in Detroit with that group. But this is where the best organizations always know what players want to hear the most. And certainly at the top of any of those conversations, Spadone, is money. And we'll see what the Niners decide to do there. But on top of money, 1A is, how do you treat players and their families? And do players trust that you're trying to win every year at the highest possible level? The Niners have proven that. They have to kind of not complete rebuild, but reload on the fly with a proud group that continues to almost get there, but just doesn't get all the way through. I think they're still very viable. I think the league still believes that Shanahan is what he appears to be. But we'll see what happens over the course of the next few months, and I think it all is going to start to line up. Once you get Purdy in place, we're going to find out how much other players respect what he is now and what he can be moving forward.
Are the 49ers still a destination if you're a free agent that's trying to ring chase? 888-957-9570. Right now, I was talking about total cap space. The Niners are slotted 12th in total cap space here with $47 million. Obviously, going to go to the Purdy contract. But I always say this, the cap is so fugazi because you could restructure contracts. You can push guaranteed money. You could circumvent this thing like the best of them. Now, you can get yourself in trouble if you do that and you keep pushing and pushing because you end up like the New Orleans Saints, who are $51 million over the cap, and they need to get back under the cap. I always get the over and under because it's negative, but you're in the red. You need to get out of that. Feels like the Saints have been in this position for like 5 years in a row. It's just a mess there. Good luck to Kellen Moore going up there. I don't know what they're going to do with their quarterback. They got Derek Carr still. They're going to cut him. There's so many different things happening in the league. That's why I just love the NFL right now too. So I can talk about the New Orleans Saints and what's going on with there. I could talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, who didn't make the playoffs this last year. Joe Burrow had one of the greatest seasons you'll ever see from a quarterback who didn't make the playoffs. Wasn't his fault. Offense was amazing. But they're trying to sign 3 guys, right? They're trying to re-sign Jamar Chase, who played on his 5th-year deal. His 5th year last year, I want to say, or he's heading to his 5th year. I always get those two confused. But he was holding out for a little bit, but he played, was an absolute baller.
It was awesome.
T. Higgins, who's also trying to get paid. he's the number 2, but he's still a very good. He could be a number 1 in a place like New England, who probably would like to pay him a lot of money. They're trying to keep him. Oh, and Trey Hendrickson, who's one of the most underrated defensive linemen in the league, defensive end, who just puts double-digit after double-digit sacks together. So there's a lot of hard truths that are going to be coming this NFL offseason, these next couple months. And Nick, there's going to be some players that you're going to be scratching your head like, oh wow, I didn't think they were going to cut that guy. I didn't think, but hard truths start happening with some of these teams. Cooper Kupp, he's older. Rams told him, sorry, bud, we got Puka Nacua now. Your days are numbered as soon as that guy emerged. It's a numbers game, whether it's the age, whether it's the money. And you know what? That's the case for Deebo Samuel. Now, Deebo's the one asking away. I think the Niners, in their heart of hearts, probably want to move on from Deebo anyways. I know they said, and John Lynch said a couple months ago when they were doing their end of the season presser, like, oh, no, we have no intention of trading him. I was like, well, you have intention of cutting him? Because I think that's what's going to be happening.
It always felt like when you watched the way things played out a couple years ago when he first was like, I want out, and then we pulled you back in.
They demanded a trade a couple years ago.
It feels like this one is different. It feels like the relationship has run its course as you watch it from a distance. Spadone, what's so interesting to me, though, in hearing you rattle off the Bengals situation and hearing us talk about the Commanders and having all the different layers. Detroit was such a great story throughout most of the year, but then fell flat in that home playoff game. That underscores to me, again, how much power the NFL has compared to the NBA, baseball, and everything else. Your average sports fan, and you and I grew up, we've loved all these different games our entire lives. Your average sports fan now knows so much more of the minutia in the NFL. The NBA out here is so powerful because people are into Steph and they love the Warriors. But start asking people on the street what they think of the Jazz's situation and what Danny Ainge has to go through in the cap. I mean, nobody cares.
They say, oh, Danny Ainge, the guy that played for the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, isn't he still running the Celtics? Yeah. I mean, people, you want to talk about processing, they'd be like 3-4 years behind. I just think from a conversational standpoint, that whole exchange is so interesting to me because there are so many people that are wrapped up into the beast that is the NFL, but not only that, the information that pops out of the league all the time. And that day-to-day feel about the NBA that might have been there 10 or 15 years ago isn't the same anymore. Fans follow their one team. They don't follow the league on the whole compared to what your average sports fan knows about the NFL and can spit out all the time.
It really is incredible when you think about it. And fantasy football, obviously a huge aspect in this, the betting, the DraftKings, the FanDuel aspect. It's massive. And eventually when California gets on the boat here and you all get on the same page.
Is it ever actually going to happen?
I think it will eventually. We obviously, Uncle Sam has to get paid too, right? Uncle Sam Jackson, shout out Kendrick Lamar in the halftime show. Love me some Samuel L. Jackson. But that's such a huge layer into all this. Not to say that, the NBA doesn't have the gambling stuff. Like they're trying, but it doesn't hit the same. When I say NBA or fantasy basketball league, they have them. I'm not playing. People are like, your daily fantasy, it's different, right? But people people in your life, Nick, that don't care at all about football, but they're in a fantasy football league.
Completely.
Everyone in your office are in there. It's the same kind of like when we have a March Madness bracket. Everyone does it. It's like, oh, I like that team. I'm going to pick this mascot. I'm going to pick
these colors.
Right? Exactly. But everyone's paying attention to football. It's like, oh, I'm going to draft Travis Kelce. Why? Oh, he's dating Taylor Swift, right? Like that's a thing. Like the NFL is so
very
good on
much a thing.
They lean into all of those relationships. Whereas, there's a lot of drama that happens in the NBA, like with trades and players and the beefs, all that. But the actual product, is something that still needs to, I don't know if it's bad per se, but it's not hitting like the NFL. And bringing it back to the 49ers and some of these question marks, we all have. Matt Barrows, who covers the team for The Athletic, does a very good job. Love Matty Barrows. He was on Willard and Dibbs the other day. Was it Willard and Dibbs, Sam? Thumbs up. Willard and Dibbs. Thank you. A couple days ago, you can find the entire interview on Wednesday. On Wednesday. Thank you. You can find the entire interview on YouTube or the Odyssey app. Download that bad boy. It is free. it is spectacular. Matt Barrows on the next steps in this Deebo Samuel situation.
They've allowed him to seek a trade. They're going to listen to any trade offers. They hope that trade offers come in. The big catch there is that they're willing to part ways with Deebo Samuel because he's got this big, $15.4 million bonus that comes due. It's an option bonus that comes due on March 22. So any team that trades for him, you're either going to have to kind of pick up all of that contract stuff that's written in now, or you have to negotiate a new deal with him. So I'm not exactly sure how eager teams are to do that. It could happen. The 49ers are hoping it would happen. But it seems to me like if you're a team that is interested in Deebo Samuel, maybe you wait for him to be released and, his contract starts over again.
Okay. So it sounds like they're going to cut him. I don't think another team is going to trade for that.
My big takeaway there, Spadone, is the release is upon us.
Right. Yeah. He's going to be gone. Teams aren't going to trade for that. They're not going to want to pay him what he's going to want. And he's going to get a fresh start somewhere else. That's what's going to happen with Deebo Samuel. All right. So Deebo's gone. You start looking at the depth chart with receiver. You got Brandon Ayuk hopefully coming back at the start of next season, but we don't know. It might linger. This is a devastating knee injury he had, Nick. So to just assume he's going to be back for training camp and everything, I think don't do that. Don't set yourself up as a fan thinking you're going to get Brandon Ayuk back. And the same Brandon Ayuk prior to the injury. We don't know what he's going to look like. It wasn't like his game was built on explosion early on, so maybe that's a good thing in all this because he was an elite route runner. But how is it going to look with a knee, right? And your route running ability, how's it going to look? Is it going to be a step slower? Because as we all know in sports, if we're even just a second off, that's the difference between 10 yards and a 5-yard loss or a 10-yard gain. Like that's what we're talking about, or an incomplete pass. So it's going to be very interesting there. So you have Juwan Jennings and you have Ricky Pearsall. Juwan, awesome last year. He was great. I was one of the pleasant surprises of the league last year was watching what Juwan Jennings was able to do, especially in that game against the Rams where he went absolutely off for 3 touchdowns. You got George Kittle. I know he's a tight end, but he's he's a receiver and he's their best receiver. So I like viewing him as that. And then you got Ricky Pearsall, who, the guy got shot right down here, Nick, on Union Square. It was insane. We were all following it. He was injured prior to that too. Couldn't get onto the practice field. Eventually comes back, and you know what? The last couple of games showed some signs of, okay, I see something here.
Maybe it's still in there somewhere.
Exactly. And that gave me some positive momentum heading into next year that he was gaining some traction with his quarterback, Brock Purdy. But that's not enough. I'm still going to be a little bit greedy here, and Shasky was kind of pushing back on me with this. Why not go after a guy like Davante Adams who's out there? Now, I just said all of this when it comes to the drama. You don't want any drama on your team. You don't want any drama with the contracts. And I get it. Last year with Davante Adams, there was a lot of drama. Whether it was in Las Vegas and forcing his way off the team there, they traded him to the Jets so he can reunite with his old pal, Aaron Rodgers, and it wasn't good there. And those are, historically, again, 2 dumpster fires of organizations with ownership, with Mark Davis, with Woody Johnson. We get all that. We get that. But Davante here, he's from Palo Alto. He's a Bay Area guy. Why not? If it doesn't cost you a lot, and again, this is projection that the Jets are going to cut him. I think they are. I think they're going to retool. They're just going to get out of the Davante Adams business. Why not go after a guy like Davante Adams? Should they go after a guy like Davante Adams, Nick?
He is a producer at the highest level during his time in Green Bay, Spadone. That's what I would go back to. Can you get a guy who feels comfortable enough in a system close enough to where he grew up to feel like he can turn back the clock a little bit and be the best version of the player we've seen before? You know what I think I go back to? What does everybody have with the Warriors right now because of the Jimmy Butler acquisition? They have hope. It was a revitalization of an organization that was just kind of flat. And that's with the all-time great in Steph, in a Hall of Famer like Draymond. I think Davante Adams at this stage of his career, given what he's shown and given the missteps that he's had at times in Vegas and for a hot second in New York, I think it would fit really well because you're going to get a guy like Jimmy in this case who wants to be shown to the rest of the league that he can play at the highest level again. So I think it's worth whatever dice roll that the Niners would have to put out there to make it happen. And I absolutely believe, given what we've seen the last couple of years from him in smaller doses, that greatness that we saw in Green Bay is still in his game somewhere.
See, I think he's a perfect complement to Brock Purdy, too, a guy that's all about timing, quick releases. That's what Devontae needs. He has those quick runs. He's not gonna beat you with speed. That's not his game. He's a possession receiver, which, again, if we don't know what we're getting from Brandon Ayuk next year, that's a perfect complement to, if he's going to be out or if he's even there, a guy that can pick you up a first down if you need it, get on the same page. You know his hands are going to be legit. Hell, even when he was with the Raiders, he did have a first-team All-Pro season when he was with his buddy Derek Carr from Fresno State. So he still has it in him. Again, I just put a lot of what happened last year at Devontae just on the situations with those teams.
Yeah.
You know, you brought him back, Antonio Pierce in Vegas, interim coach, and, you know, it was fun. Interim coaches, that's what happens. That year he took over.
He can do it. He can do it.
He beat the Chiefs on Christmas. You know, Taylor Swift is right. Everyone was watching. It's like, whoa, Taylor Swift is holding Brittany Mahomes. How is this happening? And, you know, he's like crying after the game with Tracy Wolfson on CBS. They bring him back. It was a disaster. It didn't go well. They got rid of him. They brought in Pete Carroll, grown up in an organization, a guy that knows and who has won. The Jets, listen, God bless Robert Saleh. I don't think any of that was his fault. I think he just got absolutely hosed in that entire situation. Aaron Rodgers was not good. You know, Woody Johnson, who wanted to bench Aaron Rodgers early in the season for, who was it, Tyrod Taylor? Like, it was a mess over there.
Good luck with that, Woody.
Yeah, good luck with that. Well, do you know they have the longest drought of any I think, major American sports team? They had the longest drought of not making the playoffs.
And why is that in large part, Spadone? You hit the nail on the head a little bit ago, because it always goes back to ownership and how a team is run. The Jets are not run well. They do not put the right people in the right places, both on the coaching staff and on the field, that gives you the belief that they're going to be a contender and win every time that they set foot out there. I just keep thinking about Devontae Adams as we're talking about him. Who did Aaron Rodgers and Carr continuously look for when there wasn't another option that was wide open somewhere in their reads and progressions?
Oh, they forced it to him.
It was always Devontae Adams. So to your point about Purdy, if you need that safety net and you lose Debo and he's gone, you need somebody that Purdy can look to, especially if Kittle can't get open on every single route that he runs. Who would be that complement, especially given what he's shown in these last couple stops? It would be Devontae Adams.